We learn how to secure access by specific queries. We'll do the same example as we did in BW sessions. We'll try to first restrict access to this particular query, which is part of this info area, this info queue, info provider. In the next run, what we'll do is we'll assign one more query and see if the user is able to see both the queries. And then we'll use a naming pattern using the wildcard character that will check whether we are able to see all the queries that begin with a particular naming pattern. In this case, or in our example, it would be 0FIAR_C03. So let's see how the road was built in BW, and then we'll simulate that with this access in BI. So as our first scenario, we are going to try and restrict access to this particular query. So let's log into the system and execute the transaction code pfcg, and let's take a look at the role that we created, how it would be created in BW. So let's see. Okay, let's check this role out. Now, like we have seen in the other sessions, when we restricted access by info cubes or ODS objects, from a reporting user standpoint in BI, we don't need s_s_iCube or s_ODSO, s_s_ODSO, such objects for reporting users. Now, which means that the access that would normally come in BW through these objects, we have to compensate that in BI with an LSS authorization. So we'll try to simulate this very query and see how we can build a role to give access to specific queries in BI. So let's open up another session and let's build the same role that we have for so we'll say access by query. So click on create and then give a short description. Now the only transaction that end user would need, a reporting user would need, would be the transaction RRMX. This would be needed if the users are trained to bring up the BEX analyzer using the transaction. Otherwise, they can go directly to the BEX analyzer through the start program and Business Explorer. Let's go and maintain the values and objects that are needed to execute this query. The first object that anybody would need would be the s_RFC, because MS Excel, the BEX analyzer communicates with the BI system, and for which that happens through RFC calls, and s_RFC controls the remote function calls. So now, from a query execution standpoint, we need access to the user would need access to s_rs_com and s_rs_conf1. So let's go and insert those two authorization objects. Now these two objects are related to execution of a query or query management. So the activity needed for executing a query is 03 and 16. let's go and see, give the same info area at 0FIAR because the query belongs within that info area. And the query belongs to the info area, info cube 0FARC03. So let's assign that value to the info cube field. And the name ID of the reporting component. Now, in our example, we are trying to restrict access by this particular query. In the earlier examples, we have for info cubes and ODS objects, when we saw those demos, and the name ID of the reporting component, we are given star. But in this example, we are trying to restrict by a specific query. Now, when you want to restrict by specific queries, it is always advisable that the queries and the info cubes and the info areas have a very good naming conventions. But that would be part of that the BW team has to take care of. But anyways, as a security administrator, you will get the query names if at all the access needs to be restricted by specific queries. You'll get the query names by the BW team. So in our case, we are going to restrict access to this query. So let's go and enter the query name in the reporting ID field. Is that the one? C0Q0005. So let's do that. And the type of reporting component is, because it is a rep query. Now, as we've seen so many times before, whatever fields are common between comp and comp1, whatever values you give in comp for such fields which are common, you give the same values in comp1 also. So activity is a common field between the two objects. So we give 03 and 16. Name ID reporting component, we have specified a query name here. So let's go and specify the same query name here. Type of reporting component is the field we gave is rep. So let's give the same value for query. And we'll give star as a owner. Now, the difference between BW and BI is that in BI, from a reporting user standpoint, this object is not needed. So to compensate the access from coming out of this object, what we'll do is in BI, we will go and create an analysis authorization. So to create the analysis authorization, let's open up another session. And the transaction code is rsec admin. Click on maintenance. Says Z, let's give a name called Z query. Click on create. Okay, access to queries. Let's give a short description. You can give a long description and a short description also. A medium description or long description. Now we know that we need to add three main characteristics to compensate for access coming out of this object. So what are those three? The first characteristic is for activity. The second characteristic is for info providers, that is the info cubes or ODS objects. And the third characteristic that is needed is for validity. So these three characteristics have to be assigned to a user through at least one analysis authorization. So depending on your security model. So, but these three characteristics have to be assigned. Now, let's go and assign, double click on the activity, and let's go and assign the value 03 because we need the users to see the info cubes within the info providers. so in info areas, and then this is for activity info provider. So what was the info provider in this case? The info provider was 0FIARC03. So let's go and give equals 0FIRC03. So if the queries are based out of multi-providers or ODS objects, you would give them here by inserting more rows. Validity, let's go and add, include the values of between, say 21 and go back. So we've assigned the values for the three characteristics and save. So now this analysis authorization has to be assigned to a user. Now, like we know, as we know, this can be assigned in multiple ways. So one is assigning the analysis authorization directly to the user within RSec admin transaction. So you can click on this assign button and give the user name and change, and then you can go and assign. Or you can assign through a role. So if you want to assign the analysis authorization through a role, you need to use a new authorization object called s_rs_auth. So let's go and assign the analysis authorization here. So ZQuery. So generate the role. Now let's go and assign this role to the user. So let's go and assign it to user A. Now let's log in with the user A and see if we are able to see only that one query. Which one? We should be able to see only this one query for that user. Let's try that out. Now again, you have to keep in mind that depending on what the purpose of the role is, you need other objects too. For example, once the query is executed, if it has to be, the output has to be saved in a workbook, then you need some additional objects that we'll see in another session. But anyways, right now let's go and log in with user A and see if the user is able to access only this query. Let's click on the info area button. Put the technical names on. Now the user should be able to see only one query within this list. Okay, so now you're going to see this because we have a couple of roles assigned to the user. So let's go and unassign the old role, and let's keep the query role. So let's log off and come back in again. This time by unassigning that role. Let's go and unassign the role that we had. Okay, we need to have only one role within this. Okay, so let's remove this role and save it. Okay, so let's go and execute and start the Bexnalizer again and log in with user A now. So this time the user should see only one query within that list. Okay, so let's click on the info area now. Let's put the technical names on and expand the nodes. See, now you're able to see only one info area, and within that you should see only one info cube, and within that now you should see only one query. So that is how you restrict access to queries. So let's go and add in our list this query now which is part of the same info provider and within the same info area. So this time, instead of saying one, in the next example, instead of saying one query, we should be able to see two queries. So let's do that. So for that, we'll need to modify the role. Now we'll not be modifying the analysis authorization because we are just adding a query, not info provider to the access. So let's go to the role and modify the role to include the new query. So we need to add to this field a new query, so Q002. So let's go and add to two. Now we are not going to modify the analysis authorization because in the analysis authorization we don't have a characteristics for query. We just had one for the info provider. So we are not changing the info provider. That's why we are not going to change the query. Oh, sorry, the analysis authorization. Let's go and generate the role. And now let's log in with that user A. And this time the user A should be seeing two queries. Okay, let's click on the info area button again. And then once we get the info area, let's click on the technical name button icon here. Let's go and expand. Now in this, now we should be able to see two queries, but we are not seeing, we are only seeing one. Okay, let's check why is this so. Okay, the reason we didn't see the query is because this is an example of why this two fields have to be the same. See, we included the query in comp name, the query name in the comp object, but we didn't include the same query name in comp1 object. So let's go and add that up now. And let's go and generate the role now, and we should be able to see both the queries now. So that was the mistake we made. We didn't add, we added the query name to comp, but we didn't add it to comp1. So let's go and check this out now. Click on the info area button now, and put the technical names on, and now we should be able to see both the queries. So the problem was we didn't include this query name in the comp1. So you need to, whatever values are fields are common in comp and comp1, you need to ensure that the common fields have the same values in both the objects. So in the next scenario, we'll use a wildcard character and see if we are using the wildcard characters, we can list and execute queries that begin with a particular naming pattern. So let's go and change the query name field in our role to give this naming pattern. So change the modify the field name, and what was that again? Let's see, C03 star. C03 star. Again, we are not going to modify the analysis authorization because we are just changing the query name because the cube is the same. The info provider is the same. So we are not changing any analysis authorization. Now we modified comp, so we need to modify comp1 also now. Otherwise, we will not get that desired output. So let's go and modify this object also. And say save. Let's generate the role, and let's log in with user A now again, and then see if we are able to see all the queries that have the naming pattern 0FIAR underscore C03 under this info queue. Okay, let's click on the info area button now. Now we should be able to see all the queries that have a naming pattern 0FIAR underscore C03 and whatever follows after this underscore. Let's put the technical names on. Let's go and expand. See, you can see now all the names, all the queries that have the same naming pattern that we gave in the role. So all these queries begin with 0FIAR underscore C03. Now the thing to remember here is that in the customer's place, the query names will either begin with a Z or a Y. We are using SAP standard delivered queries, so that's why they begin with 0 in the info areas or the info cubes or the query name, they begin with a 0. But in an actual implementation, when our developers create a query or an info area or an info cube, they will begin with either with a Z or a Y, because that is the customer's namespace. That any customer created object or developed objects, they have to the names of those objects have to begin with a Z or a Y. But as per the role, we can see now all the queries within the info cube, the info provider 0FIARC0 underscore C03, all the queries that begin with 0FIAR underscore C03. So, but to make this work or make the access work, you need to ensure that the rs underscore comp and comp1, the common fields have the same values. Now in this session, in this example, we didn't modify the analysis authorization because we were only basing our example on one info area, one info cube. If we had more info providers, then we would, whenever we make a change to comp, we would simultaneously also change the analysis authorization to include the new info providers, that is the audios objects or info cubes.